I'm here in the Badlands of Black Hills, South Dakota. There are very few landscapes on Earth that provide such a great glimpse of the forces that formed the Earth as we know it before, during, and after Noah's flood. The rugged rock formations that you see all around me were not always here. After Noah's flood, layers of sedimentary rocks were deposited in this region as the environment changed drastically from sea or subtropical forest to open savanna. After all of these layers were deposited, flowing water began to wear into these sediment, carving valleys and other shapes as you see behind me into the landscape to create what you can see. Seeing God's creation can invite us into a deeper admiration for Him and His handiwork. Standing here, surrounded by His creation, is easier to feel close to Him. When we respect any part of God's creation, be it nature or another human being, it creates value in what God created and ultimately leads us to admire our Creator. I went to, in Georgia, had students from both the North and the South, and a common debate between them was over how each group handled the winter. So students from up north would often make fun of the Southerners for not being able to drive in 1 inch of snow or whatever, and they would talk about how back home they had 2 feet of snow and they would still go to school. And the students from the South would often protest and say, well, we don't have all the equipment up north, like in the small towns, they have all the things that even our big cities don't. Now, I was sort of unaffiliated, as you can imagine. So neither with the North or the South. And I had been to the North, I have seen the blizzards, I have seen the heavy snow. In my observation, the situation is different. In the North, you do find tremendous amounts of snow, but in the South, it is ice. Same molecule, H2O, is making both snow and ice, but they are made under different conditions and they have different properties. So while snow is formed when water vapor freezes in the atmosphere and then comes down as snowflakes, ice is formed when liquid water freezes when the temperature drops. Snow, well, it's sort of less dense, has these air pockets in it, hence you can make a snowball. Can you do that with ice? Can you make like an ice ball? That would be pretty mean. I mean, you hurt somebody. Also, ice is thin and starts melting, and if you walk on it or if you drive on it, it's going to be very dangerous. Snow, on the other hand, when it gets compacted, it actually gets traction. So, in my opinion, what they were arguing over, the issue was something else. Now, in this message that John just introduced called Keeping Cool, we're talking about the Ice Age. We're talking about this thing called global warming that is being talked about. I believe the issue is something different. And we're going to examine that in the brief time we have. If you have your Bibles, find the book of Genesis, chapter 8 and verse 21. Book of Genesis, first book in the Bible, chapter 8 and verse 21. The main point of our message is this. God not only created this world as described in the book of Genesis, but He has also designed it to be stable, with all the necessary systems to prevent this world from going into extremes. Yes, God destroyed this world once with water because of sin, and there is evidence of it everywhere. If you saw me walking in the Badlands, you can see those gullies. You can see how water cut through and left marks everywhere. I mean, we had a little bit of rain a couple of days ago, and you can see how sediments have been deposited, just a little bit of rain. Imagine when the world is covered with so much water, that's what happens. You are left with the Black Hills of South Dakota. But God has also promised that He won't destroy the world with water again. Yes, we should be good stewards of this planet, but we should be much better stewards of the plan of God to give us salvation through Jesus Christ. So let's begin. Genesis 8, verse 21. Then the Lord said in His heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake. Although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. The passage I just read for you was a promise that God made in His heart. In His heart, meaning there was a conversation in the Trinity. We worship one God in three persons. We don't worship three gods. One God in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and they had a discussion. This discussion took place after the flood was over. After Noah came out of the ark, the animals came out of the ark, Noah's family came out. Noah did something. What did he do? He offered a burnt offerings of the clean animals, which means on the ark, there was not just the two of every kind, there were also these animals that he had kept so that when they came out of the ark, he would sacrifice them to God. So as the animals are scattering, Noah's family is coming out and exploring the world, the new world. Noah says, wait, we're going to offer a sacrifice to God. And he killed those clean animals and offered them up to God. And the Bible says in Genesis 8:21, and the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. The Hebrew word is nekoach, which means soothing, but also means appeasing. It also has the meaning of quieting, tranquilizing. The earth with the creatures had been so disobedient against God that God's holy wrath burned against the world. The world is destroyed in this flood. But as Noah offers this sacrifice, God's anger begins to subside. The point I want us to remember is this. It's not that the flood made God happy. It's the blood that brought appeasement. It's not that God said, wow, I've destroyed everything. Work done. I feel it's better now. No, it's the blood. He had to see the sacrifice, and then it was a soothing aroma. His holiness was not satisfied until the blood was shed. Now I'm going somewhere with this, because later on God will tell His people through Moses that the life of the flesh is in the blood. And I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. It's the blood. Later on, Hebrews is going to pick up on that, chapter 9:22, that without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. The word remission means cancellation. Without bloodshed, there is no cancellation of debt. The sin debt that you and I have, blood has to be shed. Again, I want you to remember this. It was not the flood that made a remission for sin. It was the blood that made a remission for sin. Yes, God destroyed the world because of flood, but it is the blood that made a cancellation of debt. And those animals were simply placeholders. You know what a placeholder is? You put something there until the real thing comes. Those clean animals were there until the real thing, the real one, who is Jesus, the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And when he died on the cross, that's when he said, it is done. All those animals that were sacrificed were simply a foreshadowing of the coming of the Lamb of God. And when he died, it was done. Let me ask you this question. What are you trusting in for the cancellation of your sin debt? Are you trusting in your own personal flood story? Think with me for a moment. Everybody has a flood story. Our flood stories may be the trials that we have experienced in life. You have no idea what I've been through. Man, if you only knew what I've been through. Are you trusting that God will cancel your debt based on what you've been through? That's your flood story. It's not the flood, it's the blood that makes a remission for sin. Your flood story may not be your trials. Your flood story may be your penance in life. Don't miss this. Some people are doing penance in life. You know what penance is? Well, I'm not a good person, man. I've done some bad stuff. I have really hurt some people in my life. What they say about me is true. I'm a wretch. They go through life as if they have a whip in their hand and they're whipping themselves every day for being this wretched person. And in that remorse, in that shame, somehow they find healing. Let me make this very clear for you. If that's what you're doing, God has nothing to do with that. That has Satan written all over it. Satan loves to see you broken and then stay broken and stay depressed and stay discouraged and beat yourself. You are still the focus of that whole performance. When God breaks you down, when God humbles you, when God puts a thorn in your side, it's only to pour his grace upon you. What is your flood story? Is your flood story my trials in life? Or is your flood story my weaknesses, my failures? Man, I know. I've been through it. It's just, I've destroyed a lot of... Don't stay there. That has nothing of Jesus in it. True brokenness by God will always come back with, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. For when I'm weak, then I am strong. So I hope you're getting this spiritual application as well. I don't want to just spend time talking about science because we're going to come to that, but I hope the spiritual applications are also coming. Don't trust your flood, trust the blood of Christ. Now let's go back to Genesis. God made a promise within himself, and the promise was, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, never again. Although human beings will do what they've always done, they have sin in their hearts from their youth, means from their childhood they are sinners. I will never again destroy every living thing as I have while the earth remains. This cycle of seed time, harvest, cold, heat, winter, summer, day and night will not stop. In other words, there is not going to be another worldwide catastrophe. Life will now continue without any threat of a worldwide catastrophe. Now, there will be occasional floods and people will die. Yes, there will be hurricanes and there will be mudslides and there will be earthquakes and volcanoes and lives will be lost, but there is not going to be a worldwide flood like the one in Genesis. It's done. Why is that important? It is important because when it comes to the current uproar over climate change, global warming, ice age. These are different words that are used for the same issue, albeit with different nuances. They're going against what God has promised. God said, I'm not going to do it again. Climate change activists, advocates are saying, not true. It's going to happen again. If we don't take care of this, that, and the other. Now, as I explained over the last 2 weeks, the worldwide flood not only destroyed the entire world, except for Noah, his family, the animals in the ark, but it also triggered an ice age. Don't miss this. The ice age, I gave you this model. By the way, these are not my models. I have used them from my study. There are legitimate PhDs from accredited universities who really understand the issues, but they look at our world through this lens of Scripture. And they have come up with models, and I think they're very good. They're very good to explain what happened to our planet. What was the catastrophe? Of course, the worldwide flood. And how did this lead to the catastrophe? We're talking about the ice age. Well, when God broke up the fountains of the deep, water began to gush out of the earth's core. And water began to come down from the heavens, from the clouds. I mean, imagine that, water coming from both ends. When that happened, something took place called catastrophic plate tectonics, where the earth's surface or the core began to crash like this, the plate tectonics, and hot magma began to rise, heating up the oceans. And what happened when you heat up water? Is going to evaporate. So water began to evaporate, going into the clouds to come back as rain. At the same time, volcanoes began to erupt all over this planet. Last week, we saw that one video from Arizona of me and our team being there of the what's known as the Agathlas Peak. You saw that weird-looking formation out in the desert. And formations like that are found all over this planet. And volcanoes began to not only erupt, but they were throwing aerosol, these tiny droplets, into the atmosphere, blocking the sunlight. Again, don't misunderstand. These are simply models. These are simply the best possible explanation of how things took. There was no camera on the ark, okay? There was no satellite imaging that we can say, well, these are models. Even secular scientists are working with models, but they present it as if it's fact. They're models. So, hot oceans, water evaporating, volcanoes erupting, blocking the sunlight through the aerosol, and that's keeping the summers from getting hot. Summers are supposed to be warm, but they're not, and snow keeps falling. Hot summers, moderate winters. Did you know for ice to form, you don't need bitter cold? Bitter cold is not going to give you ice, it's going to give you snow. So they need to be moderate winters. While this is happening after the flood, it creates what we know as the ice age. People ask me, is the ice age real? Last weekend we covered that. Ice age was real. We find evidence of that all over this planet. The mammoths you find in Siberia or even in South Dakota. You saw me in the video last time. Fossils, all this, tell you there was an ice age. Secular scientists say that the ice age happened in many stages. There were 5 or 6 ice ages. We say there was only one. Secular scientists say that it was for hundreds of thousands of years, some of them lasting even 1 million years. We say it lasted barely 500 to 600 some years. Secular scientists sometimes say that the entire earth was covered in ice. Based on evidence, maybe 30%. Right now, we have 10%. Go to the polar caps, Arctic, Antarctic, maybe 10% left. So all that to say is, this ice age happened because there was a terrible catastrophe called a worldwide flood that made all this happen. Ice age was triggered, lasted 500-600 years. While the ice age is going on, there were people like Job, Abraham, Sarah. They were still living. They were still being born, living. There was ice, not where they were, but in other parts of the world. And then the ice age sort of ended with ice sort of just to the north and to the south. The point of all this is there was a once never to be repeated catastrophic event called the flood, which caused an ice age for a brief time not very long ago. How long ago? I believe maybe 4,500 years ago. How long has this earth been around? In my understanding, maybe 6,000 to 7,000 maximum. Do we need to really panic over a non-catastrophic, relatively slow increases in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to bring about another similar catastrophe leading to an ice age? Do we need to panic over that? In my opinion, no. According to climate change advocates, we do need to panic. In fact, we are in big trouble, they say. My information is coming from Dr. Jake Hebert's book, Climate Change Conflict. He's done a great job. He is a bona fide meteorologist. He has a PhD. He's done work in an accredited university. But he's also looking at all this climate change, ice age, global warming debates, but through the lens of Scripture and his expertise. And he's giving a different perspective. So I have turned to people like that for my understanding. But climate change advocates say that we are going to self-destruct because since we started using fossil fuels, coal, gas, oil, these are fossil fuels, and according to climate change activists or advocates, ever since we began using this about 150 years ago, we are putting so much carbon dioxide in the air that we are making the planet too hot. They're saying that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas that traps the heat and it warms the planet, and we need to stop this warming because it is going to lead to a catastrophe. And the catastrophe is an ice age that is coming. As the temperatures rise because of all this extra carbon dioxide that's going into the atmosphere, making the planet warm, is going to melt all the glaciers, the Arctic northern caps, the southern Antarctic caps. The ice is going to melt, and it will cause the sea level to rise, which will lead to flooding. This will in turn cause hurricanes, which will destroy many plants and animals. And ultimately, the entire ecosystem is going to go out of whack and trigger the ice age. Everybody follow the logic? Carbon dioxide rising, heat is rising, planet surface gets warm, and it's going to cause all this ice, glaciers to melt, sea level rises, flooding begins, hurricanes happen, and all this is going to go on. But it's not just going to cause this global warming leading to ice age by just that. Other things are also part of the equation. And the other things are the changes in the Earth's orbital and rotational cycles known as the Milankovitch cycles. So not just the carbon dioxide is the culprit, but also the Earth's orbital and rotational cycles, because the way they change and they shift, it causes a large drop in the global temperatures, because how the Earth's orbit and rotation shifts and changes even a little bit will cause the sun's heat to not reach the surface, leading to this ice age that is coming. So carbon dioxide, Earth's orbital and rotational cycles, known as the Milankovitch cycles, all working together in tandem will cause this. And something about the Milankovitch cycles, Milankovitch, by the way, was a Serbian scientist back in the 1930s who came up with this model. These cycles are really in three different types. The first one is known as the precession cycle, which includes the shift in the Earth's axis that happens every 26,000 years. The second is the obliquity cycle, which is the change in the tilt of the Earth. How many of y'all remember that? The Earth has a tilt in the axis. And this change happens every 41,000 years. And then the third one is the eccentricity cycle, that is a change in the shape of the Earth's orbit that happens every 100 to 400,000 years. So these three cycles in this Milankovitch cycle paradigm, they sort of overlap, so we don't know for sure if the eccentricity is going along with the obliquity, or obliquity is not happening right now, but is the precision and eccentricity happening. So based on all these different scenarios, we have different ice ages. Some are very cold, some are not as cold, some last millions of years, some last 100,000 years. It's all very subjective, is what they say. How do we deal with all this? I don't have but 5 minutes left, but I'm going to try. How do we entangle all this? Let me just say this. I'm going to be simplistic, but this needs to be answered. And why does it need to be answered? Christianity is a thinking faith. It's because many of us have walked away and we come to church just to get fired up. I hope I hope you realize, if you're getting fired up is coming from solid reasoning, then you are in line with Orthodox Christianity. If you're getting fired up is just being emotional, well, we can get you hype. That's easy. I mean, concerts do it, ball games do it. Sometimes the bars do a better job hyping up people than churches do. So we can do that, but that's got nothing of God in it. We have to think. You know, I have this bracelet on my wrist over here from Romans 12:2. It says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." We have to think. If you come to church just to do service and help people and help the secular people do that. Billions of dollars are given in endowment to do great things. That's got nothing of Christianity in it. But when your reason to come is based on thinking that I'm trying to understand, I know this is a difficult subject, I know a lot of words I'm using that we don't use on a regular basis, but we need to understand. We need to understand, especially the young audience needs to understand. So the message like this is not optional, I believe. It is essential. So how do we answer some of these things? To start with, we need to point out three things. First is, the earth is warmer right now, but it's not because of carbon dioxide emissions by humans. When somebody says, can't you see this, that we are getting warmer? And my answer is, yes, I agree with you. Don't pull up your data from back in the 80s, okay? From some message series you heard that's on cassette tape, because now we understand, yes, it has gotten warmer, but we need to understand that fluctuation in temperature has been going on throughout the history of our world. It is true. Now, we did not keep detailed record beyond The 1800s is when weather stations started getting built, is when people said, we need to log down temperature every hour. Prior to that, people did not record temperatures like we do today. But if you want to know whether or not there was fluctuation in temperatures, read what people wrote. And here's what you find. In the writings of the ancients, you find out they're talking about it's hotter right now than it was in a previous generation. Or my mom and daddy talk about how it used to be cold and now it is warm, or how it used to be warm and now it is cold. Based on those things, you can tell that there were fluctuations in temperature. Did you know that in Europe especially, the world was warmer between 950 and 1250 AD? Did you know that? It is known as the medieval warm period. 950 to 1250 was kind of warmer. That was sort of about the time where the Vikings were sort of settling down. In the 600, 700, 800 years, the Vikings would come down and whoop on anybody and take what they want, and they would go back, right? It was back in their cold part of the world. But when it got warmer, there was more green grass, more vegetation. They began to settle down. Now here's my question. What kind of fossil fuels were the Vikings using? How did the world get warm? They were not using any of they were not driving cars. But you see, we don't ask those questions, right? We just believe. Did you know that starting in the 13th century, the world actually got colder up until the 19th century, 20th century? It got colder. But did the world stop existing? Did everybody retreat into their caves, into hibernation, starting in the 1300s into all the way 20th century? Nobody's coming out. It's kind of very cold right now. No, actually, the world in Europe exploded with knowledge. It's called the Renaissance. It's called the Reformation. The Reformation happened in not warm weather, it happened in cold weather. And then people like the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French, the Italians, the British began to go in their boats and ships and explore land. That's how America was founded. It's kind of cold. I hope we understand. When people talk about it's warmer now, yes, because there is a fluctuation that happens in temperatures throughout history. But is it based on carbon dioxide emission by humans? Then you have to explain, how did it get hot back then? What fossil fuel were they burning? The second thing we need to remember is that, yes, carbon dioxide does cause warming, but it is not that much to make the climate unstable. There are legitimate PhD holding climatologists who go against the usual narrative. Carbon dioxide is making the world warmer, and it's going to completely upend our atmosphere, our world. There are legitimate PhDs. One is Dr. Judith Curry. Judith Curry is a brilliant woman, in my opinion. I'm a PhD in manuscripts, textual criticism, and I got her book, and I couldn't understand half of it. I kind of gave up and said, she is smart. And yet she goes against her colleagues and other climatologists because she doesn't understand how can they keep pushing this agenda when there is no reason for it. And Judith Curry, by the way, has written many papers, won awards, had a tenured position. She was a member of important scientific societies. She has testified before Congress, congressional committees. And she said, I can't take this anymore. She had to resign her job. He said, why are people in my field doing what they're doing? Why do we keep saying that the rise in temperatures is going to make the climate unstable? She just wrote a book in July, by the way. It's called Climate Uncertainty and Risk, Rethinking Our Response, and about many things I didn't understand. But one of the things that she does say, which is worth for our time here, is that, listen, don't miss this, don't miss this. If the global atmospheric carbon dioxide was doubled, if the carbon dioxide that is in our atmosphere was doubled, would you like to know how much the surface temperature will go up? 3 degrees Fahrenheit. I didn't come up with this. Some backwoods preacher didn't come up with that. Somebody who got his doctorate online didn't come up with this. This is a genuine scholar. Only 3 degrees. Now, how many of you remember back in the summer when we went from 70 degrees to all of a sudden 95 degrees? Y'all remember that? Now, it was not fun. And I don't want to make light of it because people did die. There were some people who passed away because of a heat stroke and all that. There was damage to the vegetation out in Arizona, the cacti. It was things like that happen. I don't want to make light of it. But I do want to ask you, did you survive? When the temperature went up by 20 degrees, did you make it? It was not fun. I loved it. I am a warm weather person. I love it. But did you make it? Did you survive? What Judith Curry, Dr. Curry is saying is that the temperature change, as we're saying, global atmospheric doubling, is only 3 degrees. And it's not going to make the climate unstable. Something else. Did you know that more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is not necessarily bad? Now, we have a lot of students here, a lot of kids here. What do humans need to survive? Oxygen, right? What do plants need? Now, I don't know, the guy upstairs just worked that out really well. You know what happens when the carbon dioxide levels go up? Vegetation grows. And again, I'm condensing these things. I'm explaining it in as simple form as possible. But throughout the history of the world, you find places where there was nothing but desert that became an oasis, that became green because the carbon dioxide levels were up. It had nothing to do with humans, but this is part of how God has designed this world. As others have pointed out, and I mentioned under the Milankovitch cycles, some say, yes, that's true, but really the sun is the real culprit. The real culprit for warmer weathers or extreme weather. Here's the thing. Again, I don't have time to go in detail. The problem with that is that the energy put forth by the sun does not change that much over time. So much I can say. The reasoning behind a lot of what is being said is based on 3 things that are a major problem. First one is this: climate models projected through computer programs. Now, you can use computer programs to project where your business is going to be, based on the economy, based on your output, based on how things have been. You can drop it in there, 5 years, 10-year plan. This is where we're going to be. You cannot do that with climate. What we find is this: when you use computer programs, you always end up over-predicting. So here's what you find. When you look at the screen, the computer says your weather should be up here. In reality, your weather is down here. And a big reason for that variable, get ready, it's as simple as this, are clouds. How do you account for clouds? Clouds are based on altitude, latitude, the droplet size, all these things. So we can say all we want to, but the computer is showing this, folks, look at the science. Well, I know, but do you also see that it's down here where we are, and you're saying we need to be up here, and your variable that you cannot seem to force through that computer are clouds. What are you going to do about them? They always end up over-predicting. Something else, remember we talked about some of you may remember this, the hockey stick diagram. How many of y'all remember that? Some of y'all remember? Okay, all right. You just showed your age a little bit. That's okay, because some of us remember that. But back in the 90s, there was a hockey stick diagram. Where is the weather? It's like a hockey stick right now, right? The hockey stick, you see this flat edge like this, and then it goes really up. This diagram showed that the temperature in the northern hemisphere kind of stayed stable from 1000 to 1850 AD, which we know is not true. Anyways, it stayed stable and then had a sudden rise in 1850. Why? Of course, fossil fuel. Now here's something interesting about this hockey stick. It did not line up with history, as we know. When people began to put in the data, every time they put in the data, it always ended up being a hockey stick. Somebody did something very interesting. They put a random set of data, just whatever. It still gave them a hockey stick. So you get a hockey stick, and you get a hockey stick, and everybody gets a hockey stick, which means somebody had a bias. How many of y'all did not know about the hockey stick diagram? Raise your hand. I want to see that. There's a reason for that. Why? Because it was exposed. But if you were to time travel to the 90s, that was a big thing. Folks, we got to do something about this globe because of how the temperature has, but now nobody even knows about it. How interesting is that? There was also the Climate Gate email scandal in 2009. There was a conference in East Anglia University up in England, and a number of emails were leaked, and they were full of statements like, well, we don't need to show this. Let's delete this slide. Let's take this out. Hey, just delete this email. It was a big scandal, but very quickly, as soon as it appeared, it went away. And nobody even knows about it, but that was very eye-opening how this whole thing was being conjured to get people excited about this climate change. And of course, the Milankovitch theory, as I mentioned to you regarding sunlight, is based on the Earth's orbital and rotational movement. These movements, listen folks, don't miss that, these are so insignificant that it doesn't make sense. How can these little tilts send the Earth into a meltdown or a deep freeze? And if you don't believe that the Earth is millions of years old, then that whole theory breaks down. And a lot of people have questioned that, but usually they are either deniers or they end up getting canceled. You know, I'm almost done. The way it works with evolution, what do you do with evolution? You just throw time at it. When something doesn't line up, just throw time at it. 100,000? No, it doesn't work. So make it millions, billions of years ago. It's like our economy. You can't fix it? Just print more money. Just throw more money at it. It always works out. Same thing with this whole climate issue. When the Milankovitch cycle didn't work with 700 or 1,000 years or 400,000 years, just make it 480,000 or 780,000 years. I mean, just throw it. It's easy. And some of us who say that's not true, the Earth, scientifically proven, is only 6,000 some years old. Oh, you're not scientific. You're narrow-minded. I hope Christians here will investigate for yourself, and when people say otherwise, don't just sit back and just keep eating. Speak up. And speak up with understanding. Let me close with this. We need to be good stewards of the planet, but better stewards of the gospel. Protect our planet. It's because we walked away from those issues. It's because Christians don't say anything about it. The world traipses in and starts talking. Did you know I have these books in front of me that I didn't even share earlier? This is the book that I had for a couple of years by Bjorn Lomborg. He is Swedish. He does not agree with us. He is gay. He has his own lifestyle. But this book he wrote because he was sick and tired of the narrative of climate change or global warming or ice age. And then he ended up updating it, so I'm like, oh gosh, I gotta buy that book too. So I bought the updated one just recently, and his subtitle is How Climate Change Panic Costs Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet. So it's not like just Christians and pastors who say this. It's people who are on the other side who are saying, this is a false alarm. False alarm. I don't agree with everything that he says that needs to be done in this world, but at least what he says about, he's a brilliant guy. Not on our side. And yet when it comes down to this issue, he has more sense than some of our evangelical leaders who are signing climate change initiatives. I'm like, how do you do that? What caused you to do that? Could it be that we believe that God is not in control? Could it be that we believe that God is not there and we have to fend for ourselves? Could it be that we have a problem with what Genesis is telling us? Could it be that we as Christians don't think? I think all of the above. And I hope this morning, parents, children, students, men, women, boys, girls, that you are walking away more informed. I didn't give you everything. It's impossible to do that. But I hope enough has been said that you will think and not just take what is being fed through advertisements, politicians, neighbors, professors, family members, but you will think. And more than just being a good steward of the planet, which I hope you are. One of my desires is to capture the marketplace, to be out there, to be at the crossroads of life and speak on these issues and challenge you to go, you protect the environment before the others show up. You protect. And then say, but I know it's my Father's creation and He is in control. But more than just protecting the planet, more than just being a good steward of the planet, I hope you're a good steward of the plan of God to save this world, the plan of God that one day He's going to do away with this planet and make the new heavens and the new earth. That doesn't mean that we should just trash this place. If you care about the new heavens and new earth, care about this one. We have to change the way we even talk. Would you stand together?